My wife, 26F, and I, 27M, have known each other for 10 years and got married in 2018. We have very different lifestyles. She's a devout Mormon, and I am not religious. We found some way to make it work. It was a hard road, but there are still some challenges, yet we love each other very much. She has never met my biological mother. My parents were divorced long before I met her, and I broke contact with my mom after I turned 18. My mom was extremely abusive towards me growing up. She physically abused me and my sister regularly and tried to frame it on my father. She was able to manipulate a doctor to give me multiple medications growing up, and then she'd steal the meds. Her dirtbag boyfriend also tried to be abusive to me too. I cut my losses and severed all contact with my mother and her family, and so did my sister. My parents, that being my dad and stepmom, didn't approve of my wife at first because of her religion, but they get along now. When my wife asked me when she'd meet my mom, I told her she never would. She's a violent and terrible woman who has no place in my life, and I didn't want her involved in ours. I also told her not to contact anyone in my mom's family. Recently, my mom showed up at my work, which she had no knowledge of. It got ugly, and the police had to be called to remove her from the property. It was such an embarrassment. When I got home, I told my wife, and she just had this oh crap look on her face. I asked what that was about, and she confessed she had reached out to my mom and told her where I worked because my mom wanted to make amends. My wife believes that everyone deserves forgiveness and doesn't think anything could be unforgivable. I told her that it violated the one thing I had told her was out of bounds and that she didn't even tell me until everything went wrong. She, of course, has been apologetic. I told her we'd get there, but I needed time to process it. I've been sleeping in the home office, and we've barely spoken since. We are supposed to travel to her parents for Thanksgiving, but I'm really considering staying home with the dog so I can sort myself out. I'm not sure how to get over this. Edit. Added that she's met my stepmom. She's also fully aware of what my mom did to us. Update 1. I appreciate the support of those who messaged me when I last posted 4 months ago, as well as those who are curious about what happened. I didn't expect this to blow up. I'll give an update in chronological order, but trigger warning, details about childhood abuse are mentioned. To get this out of the way, my mom was served with a restraining order. She can't go on my work property, and I suffered no issues at work because of what happened. Leading up to Thanksgiving, my wife and I sat down to talk. I said I wasn't going to her parents for the holiday, and I think it would be best if we had some time apart. She was upset and scared because she has bad anxiety when she travels far alone, so her sister agreed to travel with her. But in this conversation, I asked to see the messages between her and my mom. Turns out, my mom had bothered her for months with messages on Facebook asking how I was doing, if I was alive, and saying she doesn't get to hear from her son, etc. That part is what got my wife to reply with an update on everything. She mentioned what happened at my work and named the place, of which there's only one location in our city. I knew she had been reached out to, as me, my sister, and her husband all had, but I didn't know she was constantly harassing my wife like that. In the time between my mom showing up in this conversation, my mom sent several messages accusing her of setting her up and keeping her son from her, among other very unpleasant messages. She went to her parents' place, and I made burgers and hung out with the dogs for Thanksgiving. I went over to my dad's that Friday while everyone there was out doing Black Friday things. We hung up the Christmas lights, and I told him what happened. Oddly, my dad didn't have much to say. He asked what I was going to do. I asked him for a specific file he had, and I told him I'd show her the file. My wife came home after almost a week, and the day after, I sat her down, and we had a conversation, and I pulled out the file. She clearly didn't intend for what happened, but she asked if I was divorcing her. I said no, but she needed to have told me what happened and or blocked her. If she had insisted on messaging my mom, I should have been involved to send a more generic message. At this point, I opened the file, put it in front of her, and she went completely pale. In the file were the pictures of me from the night my mom gave up custody. What happened was, we got into a fight over my grades in junior high. My mom started hitting me repeatedly, to the point where her nails had started to cut my face. At this point, I was big enough to stop her. I caught her wrist, and I twisted it enough to where she stopped and ran out of the house. The police were called because my mom said I broke her wrist. I didn't. My dad picked me up, took the photos of my bruised and cut face, and my mom released custody to him. A few of these cuts left scars that are still visible on my cheek and sideburn area. After explaining what she was seeing, she looked through what was in there. I told her she needed to understand she opened the door for my mom to have done this to me again, to my mom potentially doing that to her, and if we had any kids, they'd be at risk for the same abuse. Because my mom hasn't changed, her messages were the master manipulator going after my innocent wife. She said she didn't know it was this bad and she didn't mean for that to happen. I said we needed to go to therapy as a non-negotiable, and she agreed. I caught some heat from her parents for showing her the file. Her parents had me promise them I'd protect her and not ruin her innocent view of the world, I guess is the way to word it. She had a very slow grasp of real-world things that weren't very present in the church upbringing. Although, they actually agreed she shouldn't have responded to my mom, which was surprising. I did some solo therapy before we started our couples therapy. She was a little upset because I was distant during the holidays. It was like I wasn't there. Apparently, I had some kind of repressed or undiagnosed PTSD, and I began dissociating again after that happened, which was why I didn't seem present. I feel like we are making progress. The therapist said my wife had this subconscious desire to fix things and create her perfect family because of some issues her parents had and some issues on both sides of her family, so that was likely why she responded without checking with me. We have stopped trying for a baby for now, which she's devastated about presently because one of my stepsisters announced she's pregnant, and it really kind of hurt her because she really wants to be a mom. We are spending time together again and sleeping in the same bed. She's trying really hard to make it up to me, and she's been trying to read more about abuse and understanding those things, which is hard for her. We tried to get things back to normal throughout Christmas and New Year's. Presently, we are having therapy sessions every 2 weeks, and I see my therapist during the weeks in between. Thinking back, showing her the file with those pictures may have been a step too far. Our therapist said it was probably a lot for her to take in, but I mentioned it in our session, and I said it the night of. She needed to completely understand what door she opened and what repercussions could have come from what she did, as well as what could happen to our theoretical children if she opens that door again. I'm not sure if there was an alternative to showing her that file, but I think she understands what I really went through. Now, my wife will sometimes rub the scar lines on my face and just give me this strange look. She never questioned those scars before, and she just looks at them like that sometimes. That's where we are at. I think things are salvageable, as the way things came out before, it seemed like she sought out my mom. But I think she just got played and attempted to give my mom some peace of mind unintentionally, making a problem that she didn't understand. Thank you again for those who reached out and offered support before. Edit. Unnecessary to read, but for context, the example my wife gave in therapy about me not being present was this. We have a tradition in the second week of December, we go out together, get breakfast, and do our Christmas shopping, usually at Target because she likes getting a Starbucks hot chocolate. But as we'd go through, she'd look back at me, and I was often just staring off into the distance or not really giving full answers. I admitted I didn't remember most of what we did that day, which made her sad because that's one of the things about the holidays she most looks forward to, that day together.